In December of 2022, over the course of about a week, I watched the entirety of Steven Universe, including the movie and future. It is now February as of the writing of this script. Truth be told, it's taken me so long to start because I was unsure about how I would do a video on Steven Universe. So many people before me have given their thoughts and retrospectives on the series, how could I put some kind of spin on it to make my video unique? Approximately 1 week prior to the writing of this script, I had a crippling anxiety attack at my place of work and had to be sent home early. On my way home, I finally figured out how to present this video. It hit me like a Steven bomb sent from Homeworld. Suddenly, I knew what my Steven Universe retrospective video essay was going to be about. Join me, dear viewer, as I explain to you all how Steven Universe made me feel normal. Or, if you prefer, why I love Steven Universe. Laying back in my bed, just thinking about when we had everything we could want in life. We had nothing to do, stayed up late in our rooms, just up watching cartoons throughout the night. Back in those simpler times, only thing on our minds was what we were watching Friday nights. Had no troubles or strife, everything was alright. We were living our lives alright. Back in those simpler times. Now, to go over the basics. Steven Universe is an American animated series created by Rebecca Sugar that premiered on Cartoon Network on November 4th, 2013. It follows the story of 13-year-old Steven Quartz Cutie Pie DeMayo Diamond Universe as he develops his powers and fights alongside the Crystal Gems to spread peace and love throughout the galaxy. The show came to a close on January 21st, 2019. Following the finale, the series was given a movie, aptly titled Steven Universe the Movie, that premiered on Cartoon Network on September 2nd, 2019, and a follow-up series titled Steven Universe Future, which aired from December 7th, 2019 to March 27th, 2020. To start off, Steven Universe was another silly episodic show like many others before it on the network, but about halfway through Season 1, we started getting little sprinklings of lore. And by Season 2, the series started to become even more lore-heavy, telling a proper overarching story, something that was generally new to the channel. At the time, the only other shows on Cartoon Network to really have frequent several-episode-long arcs off the top of my head were Ben 10, Teen Titans, and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. But, of course, outside of all of that, what really kept the show going and kept a consistent fan base watching was the characters. Steven Universe had a sizable cast of characters both loved and hated by its fan base, and, well, those characters are going to be my biggest focus in this video. Naturally, there's no better place to start than with the title character himself, Steven Universe. At the beginning of the series, Steven is a happy, excited goofball. Very few things take the smile off of his face, and when they do, it's hardly gone for long, save for a few incidents in the first half of Season 1. But of course, even as a crystal gem, Steven is a child, being only 13 at the beginning of the series, and as it goes on, he suffers through many, many traumatic events. In Season 2, Episode 1, Full Disclosure, Steven tries to distance himself from his best friend because he realizes the dangers that come with being a crystal gem, and he's terrified for her safety. For the first time in the series, he begins to believe that what he and the gems are doing is something to be afraid of. Going back to an earlier episode, in Season 1, Episode 16, Steven the Sword Fighter, Steven witnesses a gem being poofed for the first time when Pearl is caught off guard and impaled by a hollow pearl. This sticks with him, and reappears in Season 2, Episode 6, Sworn to the Sword, when Steven impulsively forms a bubble around himself and Connie upon the arrival of a hollow pearl, showing that he has his reservations about letting his human friend face off with it. In a later episode, Season 2, Episode 12, Keystone Motel, after Garnet unfuses, Greg takes Ruby, Sapphire, and Steven on a little trip to clear their heads. But throughout the trip, Ruby and Sapphire do nothing but argue, and eventually, it culminates in Steven blaming himself for their constant fighting, something he'll continue to do for various reasons throughout the entirety of the show. And on top of the few things I've mentioned here, there's a multitude of other things he faced all within the course of a year, between the ages of 13 and 14. There is a 14-minute video on YouTube of every traumatic thing Steven had to go through in relation to the crystal gems alone. By the age of 14, Steven had to deal with so many adult issues, and it wasn't until near the end of the series when somebody finally asked if he was okay. Season 5, Episode 20, What's Your Problem? 8 episodes before the finale is the first time that somebody in the series cared to ask Steven how he's feeling. Flash forward to Steven Universe the movie, where Steven watches his closest friends, his family, all have their memories wiped near permanently. With his weakened powers, he exhausts and nearly kills himself trying to restore their memories. Then, near the end of the movie, he says this.
I don't get it!
Huh?
Why aren't my powers back? Aren't I reliving every horrible thing that's ever happened to me? A gem I barely know is trying to kill me. I'm paying for stuff my mom did that had nothing to do with me. I'm struggling with my powers. The world's about to end. What piece could I be missing? This is the story of my life!
In just a single day, Steven has relived nearly every traumatic event from his childhood, and even now, in this moment, at his lowest point, the weight of the world still rests on his shoulders. If he fails, the Earth ceases to exist. Let's move forward then to Steven Universe Future. The series starts off rather tame for Steven Universe standards, but as it continues, Steven begins to show more and more of his repressed trauma. His entire life, Steven was trained and taught to help people. But now that the world's no longer in danger, and all of Little Homeschool's students have graduated, he's not able to help anymore, and it leaves him questioning his purpose in life. He worries about how it'll affect his relationship with the gems. And on the opposite side of that, he worries about his relationship with Connie now that she's busier with school, and his dad since he's busy managing Sadie's band. He worries that he won't fit in with human society because of him being part gem. He's worried about his future. And eventually, all of that worry gets to him more and more until eventually, he makes the worst possible decision.
Steven?
Connie, will you marry me?
What?
Let's get married and live as Stefani.
What?
Crushed by Connie's rejection, Steven begins to lose control of his powers. In episode 14, Growing Pains, Steven goes to a hospital for the first time in his life, where he recounts all the trauma he's experienced over the years, a lot of it still clearly weighing on him. As he has a mental breakdown in the hospital, his dad shows up, and Steven finally opens up about his problems. In the following episode, Mr. Universe, Steven learns of his dad's childhood during a road trip. Amongst a sequence of events, Steven begins to lose his temper, angry with Greg because of his lack of a normal childhood. This eventually leads to him crashing Greg's van. In the next episode, Fragments, Steven begins down a destructive path of bottling his feelings and acting fine. Eventually, feeling the need to distance himself from everything, he meets with Jasper in the woods. After a series of events, one thing leads to another. Steven, angered past his breaking point, loses control and shatters Jasper. For anybody in the audience unfamiliar with Steven Universe, shattering a gem is generally on par with murdering a human being. The shattering ends up resolved by the end of the episode, luckily for Steven, but after the event, he's afraid to admit his actions to anybody, leading him to flee to Homeworld to see the diamonds. But despite their best efforts, they can't help Steven either. It's during episode 17, Homeworld Bound, where we witness Steven imagining himself shattering White Diamond as revenge for all the awful things she'd done to him in the past, after which he immediately runs home, ignoring the Diamond's pleas for him to stay so they can help him. The following 2 episodes follow Steven as he spirals deeper into a pit of despair, denying that he's struggling to everybody around him, until eventually he breaks down and admits to Greg and the gems that he views himself as a monster, leading him to manifest himself into a giant pink beast. All of Steven's closest friends and family come to his side in an attempt to aid him, counteracting his belief that he's a monster by recounting all of the good he's done. But deafened by his own emotions, not a word gets through to him. In this moment, everybody begins to blame themselves, doing the thing they've done throughout all of Steven's struggles, making it about themselves. That is, until Connie comes to set things straight. Throughout the series, Connie has been the strongest supporter that Steven has, always being by his side through both thick and thin. She always worries about him first and herself later, something that all of the adults around Steven should have been doing in the first place. In true Steven Universe fashion, the day is saved with a hug. But this time, instead of giving the hug, Steven is receiving it. He breaks down into tears as the words of his loved ones finally get through to him. He finally sees that he's not the monster he believes himself to be. A lot of people don't like Steven Universe Future, for many valid reasons, but I personally like Future for a reason that I find to be just as valid. Steven Universe Future finally gave me a character to identify with. I've struggled with a severe temperament disorder for my entire life, and the longer I've lived, the more I've hated myself for it. For the longest time, I believed that I was a monster. No matter how much my family and friends reassured me that I was just struggling, and that they understood, it never made me feel any better about myself or my outbursts. I believed I didn't deserve love or happiness, that the world around me should have hated me as I hated myself. I convinced myself that the universe would be better off if I was dead. And I continued to feel that way, until I saw a universe feel the same thing. I'm not a self-centered person. I know there are others around me and that they all have their own struggles. But it wasn't until Steven Universe Future that I fully grasped the concept that there are others out there like me. That I'm not alone in the world like I thought I was. The first time I watched Future, it was the dead of night, and I watched the entire show in the span of a few hours. And after I finished, I cried for half an hour in silence. Because I finally understood that I'm not alone. I finally understood that having temperament issues doesn't mean that I'm not normal. Okay. Now, of course, while Steven is the main character, he's not the only one that struggles throughout the show. I won't be going as in-depth with the rest of them, but I will talk about the various characters that are important to the series to varying degrees of depth, depending on the character's role in the series and how much I can say personally on their struggles. I'll be going in no particular order, just talking about characters as they come to me. Lapis is the character I feel I most identify with in the original show. Lapis is closed off and angry, even if not outwardly, but the part of her I identify with the most is being trapped in an abusive relationship. The fear of being apart from them, the pain of being with them, rationalizing their poor behavior, the manipulation and toxicity, the desperate inability to leave, even at your lowest point, and finally, the pain of having to admit that the relationship is unhealthy. And it never stops there. It always lingers and sticks with you. It bleeds into your future relationships, leaves you near incapable of being vulnerable, even with the person you should trust most, because the person you believed you could trust most broke that trust time and time again, and you kept telling yourself it was your fault, that you were the problem, even after the relationship ended. She's anxious, untrusting, closed off, all from her first appearance in the first season. And while she takes steps to getting better and has improved a lot by the movie, some of that pain and anger is still present, as shown in future episode 8, Why So Blue, where she lashes out at 2 other Lapis Lazulis for calling her pitiful, going as far as to nearly poof or even shatter them before she realizes that she's frightening the people around her. And even moreover, she becomes angered when the other Lapises call her action a display of strength. Afterwards, she explains to Steven that she lashed out because the other Lapises reminded her of herself, showing some signs of self-disdain as well.
I wish I hadn't done that. It's just, they reminded me so much of myself. It's infuriating.
Give yourself a break. You've grown a lot. It's not your fault they're stuck in their ways.
On the other side of that same spectrum, Peridot is anxiety-riddled for the better part of the series. She's scared of the diamonds retaliating and attacking Earth. She's scared of the cluster breaking free and forming to destroy the Earth. She's scared of her friends disappearing or abandoning her. For a bit of the series, she feels inadequate because she, up until a certain point, has no powers or abilities of her own that make her special. She places a lot of her self-worth in the opinions of others. In Season 2, Episode 20, Back to the Barn, Peridot gets caught up in making fun of the other gems because it makes Amethyst laugh, until she says something that strikes a nerve for Amethyst. Instead of realizing her mistake immediately, she becomes upset that Amethyst no longer finds her funny. In a later episode, Season 3, Episode 8, Barnmates, Peridot attempts to get close with Lapis after she comes back to Earth, failing at every turn and becoming increasingly upset as she just wants to impress her. Eventually, she gives Lapis her most prized possession, a gesture that's met with,
"I don't want your garbage."
Leaving Peridot confused and upset. She just wants to help, but she can't, and she doesn't know why. She feels useless.
So tell me then, what you want from me. And whatever that is, I'll do it.
I want you to leave!
Okay.
Amethyst, for the majority of the first season, is entirely comic relief. She's not one to take things seriously unless the situation really calls for it. This changes in Season 1, Episode 40, On the Run, when Amethyst begins to show her insecurities, from
Parasites like me!
to
I'm just an embarrassment to you!
to
I'm not gonna let you stand there and remind me of everything I hate about myself!
and finally,
I never asked to be made!
Amethyst goofs off in an attempt to entertain her fellow gems in the hopes that it'll make them like her. Because she hates herself so much, she can't fathom the idea that her friends accept her for who she is.
Amethyst, I had no idea you've been upset about this.
What? You had no idea? Oh, this is like my entire existence. You want to pretend that none of this ever happened. You think I'm just a big mistake.
Pearl struggles a lot with self-importance, especially early on in the series, something that's first explored in Season 1, Episode 45, Rose's Scabbard. In the episode, Pearl takes Steven to Rose's armory, where she's made upset by the knowledge that Steven already knew of the armory and its contents. She then becomes increasingly more upset to discover that Rose Quartz kept secrets from her, leading her to run from the temple. Steven chases after her, and during their conversation, it's implied that even now, years after Rose gave up her body to give birth to Steven, Pearl's actions are dictated by how she believes Rose would judge them. These feelings are expanded upon in Season 3, Episode 12, Mr. Greg, in which Pearl is invited to join Greg and Steven on a trip to Empire City. During the trip, while she has her reservations, Pearl begins to have fun. Until...
You're having fun!
More or less.
So dance with me, just say...
No!
Of course, after this, Pearl sings It's Over, Isn't It?, where she finally lets all of her feelings out.
It's over, isn't it? Why can't I move on?
At its core, Steven Universe is an action comedy series. So, in the spirit of that, I'd like to follow up a dark topic with something a little more lighthearted. And what could be more lighthearted and bubbly than the music of Steven Universe? I've stated publicly before, and will state publicly again, despite what you think of the series in terms of plot, world building, characters, etc., the music is unmatched. Ask anybody what their favorite Steven Universe song is, and 9 times out of 10, they won't know because there are too many good ones to choose from. Similarly, my favorite Steven Universe song changes quite often, but I believe that, like with Phineas and Ferb, I can narrow it down to my top 10. So everybody, strap in for Matt's top 10 Steven Universe songs. Number 10. Dear Old Dad, Season 1, Episode 27, House Guest. Dear Old Dad is a pretty short song, which is why it's at number 10. Regardless, though, of its length, it's a nice song with some pretty cute lyrics. Number 9, Change Your Mind, Season 5, Episode 28, Change Your Mind. The perfect song for the ending of the original series. Change Your Mind is another short song, but one with a strong message that more people in the world could stand to learn. Number 8, Change, Steven Universe, the movie. The first of 2 songs on this list from the movie. Change spoke to me from the moment I first heard it out of context from the movie, and spoke even louder when I heard it with context. It carries the same general message as Change Your Mind, but with the idea that Steven is directing more at himself, because he'd forgotten how to do so. Number 7, Full Disclosure, Season 1, Episode 50, Full Disclosure. Full Disclosure was my favorite song when I was younger. It was the first real serious moment of the show. This song was, to me, the turning point of the series from a silly action comedy with an episodic plot to a show with a larger story. Number 6, No Matter What, Steven Universe, the movie. My favorite song from Steven Universe, the movie. No Matter What is a beautifully written song about friendship that rivals You've Got a Friend in Me, with a message that hits much, much harder after watching the entire series. Number 5, Distant Shore, Season 5, Episode 17, Can't Go Back. I think this song, Distant Shore, was the one that made me realize I had to make this video. What Lapis is saying here, maybe I'm not alone, clicked in my head. We're not alone. Nobody is. There's always somebody there, even if it doesn't feel like it. We just need that push to talk to them. Number 4, Love Like You, Steven Universe credits. This one's a classic. Before I started this video, I asked a bunch of people which song I should cover for it, and about 80% of them said Love Like You. The song itself is, of course, beautiful and, in retrospect, works really well as a song talking about Steven directly. Number 3, Familiar, Season 5, Episode 25, Familiar. I have no idea how to describe why I like Familiar so much. Up to this point in the show, Steven and the people around him question if he's truly his own person or just another form of his mother. Familiar in itself poses the same question, then answers it with, maybe I am, but that's okay. Number 2, For Just One Day, Let's Only Think About Love. Season 5, Episode 23, Reunited. Who doesn't love a good wedding? Me. I find weddings incredibly boring. Let's Only Think About Love does a fairly good job of bringing up a lot of the things the characters have struggled with in the show and putting a decently positive spin on them, showing that Steven, despite his trauma, still sees good in the world. Number 1, Here Comes a Thought. Season 4, Episode 4, Mindful Education. Here Comes a Thought is extremely important to me. I often find myself trapped in my head, thinking through scenario after scenario, things I've said and done in the past that I could have said or done better, or that I shouldn't have said or done at all. A lot of us do this, but Garnet is here to remind us and Stevani that our past mistakes don't define who we are today, and that we shouldn't get wrapped up in thinking about what we could have done then, and should instead be thinking about what we can do now. When I made my Phineas and Ferb video a couple of years ago, I made the mistake of just talking about the songs I liked without really going into what made the overall music so incredible and iconic. And considering that the music is just as, if not more important to Steven Universe, I wanted to make sure that I went a bit more in depth this time. The instrumentations are always beautiful, and the vocal performances given by the cast never fail to amaze me. Even now, I'm upset that some characters didn't sing more. Lapis got 2 songs. Bismuth didn't get a song until the movie, and White Diamond, who, mind you, is played by a Broadway actress, never gets her own song in general. Now, I could talk about the musical parts of Steven Universe for hours, but that's been done time and time again by other reviewers of both cartoons and music alike. So instead, I'd like to touch on an aspect of it that often flies under the radar. And to do that, I've called upon the friend who pointed this aspect out to me for help. Everybody, please give a warm, righteous welcome and lend your ears to my buddy, Quizzique.
Thanks, Matt. Steven Universe is one of the best animated shows to come out in the past... I'm sorry, it will have been a decade come May 2023? Am I reading that right? Huh. Anyway, clearly, Steven Universe is a great show. We all know that. But I think something that goes overlooked in conversation about the show, and something that is key in setting tone and atmosphere, is the music. Now, not the musical music. The songs are a whole beast of their own, and it's widely agreed upon they're one of the best parts. But what I'm talking about is the background music, the tunes that play during fight scenes, emotional moments, ambience, and so on. If you ever go on another rewatch of the show, like I have been recently, make sure to pay extra attention to that background music, the original soundtrack, and you will realize just how genius it is. The vibe of Steven Universe's soundtrack I would best describe as a mix of many things. I compare it to the Terraria soundtrack. Terraria is one of my favorite games, and the soundtrack has this sort of different feel to it that I think Steven Universe also picks up on. I've heard people say it's similar to the Earthbound soundtrack, which from what I've heard from that game's soundtrack, I can definitely agree with as well. There's some lo-fi mix into the Steven Universe soundtrack as well, and it's a whole amalgamation of different styles. However, that's not even the genius part about it. That's not the most genius part. Pay attention and you'll hear leitmotifs throughout the whole show. Not just melodies, but entire instruments attributed to the main characters. For example, Pearl can be often accompanied by an acoustic piano in her scenes as it complements her elegant nature. Amethyst's chaotic personality is best fit by the heavy percussion that surrounds her scenes, which can be heard in fight scenes and other intense moments. Garnet is associated with the deep synths, which symbolize her cool-headedness and just pure badassery. Steven's theme is a bit hard to describe, but at least in the original show, not counting Future or the movie or anything, a lot of his soundtrack involves things that can be seen as a bit childish in nature. You've got vibraphones, you've got xylophones, you've got some chiptune in there, and some lighter synths to contrast Garnet's deeper synths. You have some lighter synths working into the soundtrack. The best place to pick out all of these different instruments is when the gems fuse. Opal's theme has fast-paced piano melodies with a heavy drum kit alongside it, to symbolize Pearl and Amethyst. Sugalite has very deep bass and synths that hits heavy due to her heavy metal nature. Sardonyx's mix of piano and synth helps push along the vibe of her showman-esque personality. So on and so forth. Along with that, you will also, of course, hear melodies repeat for characters. It's not just the instruments, there are, in fact, melodies that come back again and again. For example, Lapis has a very distinct melody that you can pick out just with the first 4 notes of her song that you hear when she is first introduced in Ocean Gem. Garnet's most badass moments are risen to 11 just by that powerful Stronger Than You melody from all the way back in the season 1 finale. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about the genius of the composers of the show. However, I don't want to take up Matt's video too much, so all I have left to say is I highly recommend just taking a listen to the soundtrack, to the OST on its own sometime. Not the the musical songs, just the soundtrack, the background music. One of my personal favorites is Peridot in the Rain, from the episode of the same title, In the Rain, if you want somewhere to start. All right, thanks for having me, Matt. Back to you.
Oh yeah, oh, mwah.
Something I feel like is severely underrated in the series is the art and animation. Sure, people talk about it, but more often than not, if you bring up Steven Universe, people immediately think of the music or the characters. The look of Steven Universe is phenomenal. Even somebody who doesn't like the series has to admit that it looks beautiful. Every character and environment has something unique and beautiful about them. And the colors. Oh my god, the colors! I'm not a traditional artist. I can't draw to save my life, so I'm not the best at critiquing art in any sense. But I love colors and designs so much, and the colors of Steven Universe scratch the monkiest itch in my brain. Everything is so soft and pretty, but can become intense at a moment's notice, and even the intense colors are pretty. I really wish I had a better way to describe any of what I'm talking about, but I just, without proper knowledge of the ins and outs of arts, it's really difficult for me to describe. So, I've asked yet another friend for their input. Everybody, please give a warm, righteous welcome and lend your ears to Ian of Modtro64.
Hello, Raichous. Thanks for having me on. Now, as an artist... Actually, no, wait, hold on. If I'm going to be talking about the art, I need a more appropriate form. There we go. Okay, so, if I were to describe the art in a single sentence, it'd be this. Beautiful, yet inconsistent. But let me be more in-depth. The art in Steven Universe and Steven Universe Future is just gorgeous to look at. On some shots, the art is decent and serves as a good backdrop. You know, so your characters aren't standing in bland scenery. But other times, the backgrounds are really good, and in some cases, astounding. Also, kinda sneaky, because in all of the backgrounds, there are diamonds. No, not those diamonds, these ones. They're used in all of the backgrounds. They're used as the shine for stars, or as bits of light refractions. It's one of those things that you notice when you rewatch episodes. You could see it as a stylistic choice, but you could also see these diamonds as a nod to the fact that the diamonds, as in these ones, have had an impact on Earth, or the galaxy in general. But in other shots, holy Japanese mushrooms! This stuff is like something you'd see in anime that's pure sakuga.
What's sakuga?
Oh, glad you asked. Sakuga is a term used in anime, but it can also be used in other forms of animation, like Western cartoons or 3D animation, etc., etc. But it's used to describe a moment in animation when the quality of the animation suddenly increases in quality. Like that one fight with Jasper and Smoky Quartz, for example. Or, an even better example...
Spoilers for Steven Universe the movie, and Steven Universe Future, so skip to the following timestamp on screen. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you? Anyway, that scene where Steven fuses back with his gem half in front of White Diamond. Pure Sakuga. Or when we first meet Spinel in the Steven Universe movie, where she moves more like a cartoon character from old Rubber Hose animation. Beautiful. Or that one fight scene with Steven and Jasper that's like a Dragon Ball fight, thanks to the choreography and impact each hit has. In fact, you could put the sound effects in here and it'd work just fine. In fact...
That's more like it! Come on! Show me what you can really do!
And at the end of that episode, yeesh! Hard, heavy stuff. But also good dramatic lighting. But I'm getting off track. Plus, I don't want to unintentionally make Matt's video an hour long, cause I still need to mention the inconsistent part of that sentence I mentioned from earlier. So, overall, the art is great. But if I had to get nitpicky, I would mention some inconsistencies in the animation. When you talk about animation, there are some things most people are familiar with, like storyboards, or in this case, model sheets. Model sheets are used in animation to help describe a character in 3 dimensions, and allows the animators to make sure the character stays on model and they don't look off. Now, for the most part, the Steven Universe crew does a good job, but you can really tell who was in charge of an episode just based on how Steven is drawn in the episodes. Look at this graph! In addition, characters are supposed to be certain heights, but sometimes they're drawn the same height or are drawn taller or shorter. Now, while this is technically a complaint, but I'm not that critical to really make it a point, hence why I condensed it into a single sentence. It's also a neat thing to notice. In fact, you could make a game out of it.
Did someone say game?
Wait, no, I didn't say—
I got this. It's time to play Who Drew Steven? With your host of the most, Matt HazelMoth. From Homestead, with our contestants, spdy4 from the YouTube channel ModPro64, and his mascot, Arrow the Dragon.
Arrow?
What? I like game shows.
Well, I do too, but we're supposed to be—
Enough chatter. Who drew this Steven? Is it A. Rebecca Sugar, B. Ian Jones Corty, C. Jeff Liu, or D. Hillary Florido?
Oh, I know.
So, what's the answer?
That is Jeff Liu.
You are correct. You win.
Thank you. You're too funny.
Okay, we're done here. Can I finish my thoughts and let Matt get back to his video?
Of course. Finish right here.
Oh. Okay. So, another thing I really like about the art is the use of color, especially the use of light. The lighting effects used in Steven Universe is seriously giving me Mark Ferrari vibes. The way things look during the day, or how things look during dusk, twilight, or night, or different environmental conditions like storms, blizzards, or the harsh lights used on the homeworld ship. The eerie atmosphere when we first learned about the forced fusion experiments, or the amalgamations as I call them. I could go on, but if I keep listing examples, I won't be able to wrap things up. So one last thing I can quickly talk about is the character designs. Steven, as both a kid and as a teenager, looks good. He's chunky, but he's not, like, obese. He's got a good build to him, and the use of round and square shapes helps define him as someone who is empathetic, yet strong. Also, the gems themselves are uniquely portrayed in ways that would define their gemstones in real life. Garnets are tough, indicated how she has mostly square shapes, and her gem power are gauntlets. Also, in real life, garnets are both beautiful and sturdy, earning a 6 or 7.5 on the Mohs scale. Amethyst is short and chunky. 2 not only indicate she's down to earth, but also the fact amethyst can be found in geodes. Pearl is tall and slender, which can reflect that pearls are formed in oysters, being the only organic form of jewelry, but also how pearls can take on a weird oblong shape if they're formed naturally. Round, spherical pearls are man-made. Oblong ones are natural. But my favorite gemstones to note or bring attention to are bismuth and peridot. Bismuth is a blacksmith, and bismuth in real life is a metal crystal. And when bismuth crystals are formed, they take on this pyramid shape with a rainbow sheen, like how her dreadlocks are multicolored, and how her gem is in a pyramid spiral. And also, since she's a blacksmith, she deals with a lot of metals. And peridot is clever. Peridot has metal powers because peridots in real life have magnesium in them.
But magnesium isn't magnetic.
True, they're not ferromagnetic, but peridots are paramagnetic, meaning it can interact with different materials when exposed to a magnetic force, but it's weaker. But I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. Am I missing anything?
What about the humans?
Ah, yes, the humans. How could I forget the humans? All of the humans in Steven Universe have a variety of shapes that reflect their personalities and reflects the diversity we have. Kiki, Greg, Vidalia, Lars, Sadie, Petey, who my phone kept correcting to Pee-wee for some reason. The Cool Kids, Onion, and Connie, all of them have unique designs and fit their personalities. But I think my favorite thing about the character designs for both the humans and the gems is that they both have very unique silhouettes. Silhouettes can help a character stand out. If their silhouettes were the same or similar, they'd be very uninteresting, and it'd be confusing on who's who. But thanks to both the humans and gems having wildly various shapes, not only do they stand out, but they're also good at representing different body types. Even if you took similarly shaped people, you'd have no problem telling who is who. But that's enough talk. I think it's time I hand the reins back over to Matt. So, back to you, Mr. Raichous.
Goodbye.
It's time for the part of the video that I'm both excited for and dreading. I'm going to talk about the finale of Steven Universe, then follow it up with my general thoughts on Steven Universe future. If you didn't come here for an unpopular opinion, too bad. You're already the majority of the way through the video. You might as well stick around. I've seen a lot of things said about the finale of Steven Universe. It's rushed. It doesn't make sense. Why didn't Steven shatter or bubble the diamonds? The list of issues people have goes on and on. I can't say it wasn't rushed because truthfully, the crew didn't have many episodes left to wrap up the story, so they had no real option but to rush it at the time. However, I do personally believe that the ending makes sense. Why would Steven shatter or bubble the diamonds when he needs them to heal the corrupted gems? Not to mention, it'd likely cause another war between Earth and Homeworld, which is the exact opposite of what Steven and the crystal gems want. Then there's the opposite argument of why did the diamonds submit so easily? Bro, it's because this pink little fucker is terrifying! Steven could have easily shattered the diamonds if he desired to do so, and they're all aware of that, especially after White removes Steven's gem, leaving Steven's gem form without his human empathy to display the entirety of his strength with minimal effort. It is incredibly important to remember that Steven, despite being half human, is still a diamond. He's just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the other diamonds. It's also worth mentioning that Steven is an empath. His powers rely solely on emotions. He both literally and figuratively has the ability to change hearts and minds. White Diamond didn't submit because Steven cried or gave her a hug like a lot of the folks on Twitter seem to think. White Diamond submitted because Steven made her realize that she isn't quite as perfect as she'd led herself to believe.
What's happening? What is this? What's wrong with them? They're turning pink. I don't understand. I'm in control. Something's wrong with me. No!
And now on to Future. A lot of people dislike Future, and I can't say I'm quite sure why. I've not seen many consistent complaints about it, so instead of responding to criticisms, I'm just gonna talk about why it's important to me. I already mentioned earlier that Future gave me a version of Steven that I can easily identify with. But outside of the anger, there are other aspects of him that I connect with. In episode 11, In Dreams, Peridot and Steven begin to hang out more as they try to rewrite the reboot for Camp Pining Hearts, a series they mutually enjoy. This process eventually takes a toll on Steven, but he decides to brush it aside, worried that if he doesn't continue trying, Peridot won't want to hang out with him anymore. Of course, Peridot tells him that this doesn't matter and his safety and well-being are more important to her. And with that, for the first time, she takes off her visor, letting herself be vulnerable. In episode 7, Snow Day, Steven struggles with trying to work while the gems want to play Steven Tag, a game where, when a gem is tagged, they have to shapeshift into young Steven. Unbeknownst to the gems, this greatly upsets Steven, who believes that they're not willing to look at him and see him for the young adult he's grown into. At the end of the episode, the gems apologize and update the rules of Steven Tag to reflect the changes in Steven's body. In episode 12, Bismuth Casual, Steven, Pearl, and Connie take Bismuth to a roller rink to help her learn to socialize more easily with humans, but it quickly turns out that Steven is the one who needs help socializing. After years of being a kid with a rock for a belly button, Steven has no idea how to interact with normal people. Throughout the night, his anxiety builds. Connie is, of course, worried about him, but Steven, being Steven, pushes his feelings aside. He finally opens up to Bismuth, who tells him that Connie came out to the roller rink to spend time with him, and that she doesn't care if he's weird. Steven talks with Connie and they fuse to skate together. I think the most beautiful part of this scene is when Stevani picks himself up by the back of Steven's jacket, because to me, it symbolizes Connie picking Steven up when he's down. And finally, episode 20, Future. In this episode, Steven tells Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl that he's leaving home to travel across the country. The gems take it surprisingly well, but Steven can't shake the feeling that something's wrong, especially after Peridot, Lapis, Bismuth, and even Jasper are more upset than the gems. He decides to give them gifts to gauge their reactions again, giving each of them something reminiscent of their relationship, but again, they react well. None of them seeming at all upset that he's leaving, making him more and more upset himself. So Steven says his final goodbyes to the gems, each one with a smile on their face, excited for this new chapter in his life. But as he watches the gems disappear from his rearview mirror, he becomes even more upset and quickly shifts into reverse to confront the gems one final time before leaving.
What's wrong with you guys? Aren't you sad I'm leaving?
Oh man, I can't take this anymore.
We were trying to be strong for you. Pearl agrees.
You guys!
I was kidding, man. I'm never gonna delete your save files. Oh, I love that ukulele. I'll never play anything else.
I'd be overjoyed to plan your wedding. In fact, I've already planned over 363 versions of it.
Why didn't you guys just tell me all of this?
I'm sorry, Steven. I couldn't resist looking into your future. I peeked. I saw a possibility that our tears would keep you from leaving.
We didn't want to hold you back.
But I also saw many paths ahead of you, and we are a part of all of them. Wherever you end up, we will visit you to talk, to listen, to be there whenever you need us. We love you, Steven.
I love you too.
Steven Universe did great things for representation in children's media, representing several mental health struggles and identities. There is somebody who speaks to just about everybody in Steven Universe, regardless of race, sexuality, or gender. It even set a new standard, being the first show on kids' television to feature a same-sex marriage. This franchise broke grounds that some never thought possible, And it's led to even more amazing things, like Clyde from the Loud House or Willow from the Owl House, both having two fathers. Or hell, speaking of the Owl House, that show has the first same-sex kiss to be featured in a Disney property for children, and between two main characters, no less. So, say what you will about Steven Universe. Love it or hate it. Steven walked so we could run. And I couldn't be more grateful. Grateful for a show that looked at all different kinds of people and told them that they have a place in the world. Steven did this for me, and I hope that for my viewers out there who have watched Steven Universe, he did the same for you. My name is Matt Raichous, and I am normal. Thanks for watching. I was fine with the men who would come into her life now and again. I was fine, 'cause I knew that they didn't really matter until you. I was fine when you came, and we fought like it was all some silly game over her, who she'd choose. After all those years, I never thought I'd lose. It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? You won, and she chose you, and she loved you, and she's gone. It's over, isn't it? Why can't I move on? War and glory, reinvention, fusion, freedom, her attention, out in daylight, my potential, bold, precise, experimental. Who am I now in this world without her? Petty and dull with the nerve to doubt her. What does it matter? It's already done. Now I've got to be there for her son. It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? You won, and she chose you, and she loved you, and she's gone. It's over, isn't it? Why can't I move on? It's over, isn't it? Why can't I move on? Hey guys, it's Raichous, coming in at the end here to give a special thanks to Ian from Modtro64 and Quentin from Quizzique for collaborating with me in this video. It was fun, and I hope to work with them again in the future. I also wanted to tell you all that if you liked my cover of It's Over, Isn't It?, it'll be available on my YouTube channel, Matt Raichous Music, as well as whatever streaming service you prefer to get your music through. As always, thanks for watching, and remember to stay righteous.